Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another hearing of The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom with John and Elizabeth Sherrill. And we appreciate the Bible Broadcasting Network for making this available to us. I'm your friend, Pastor Mark, and let's begin now with Chapter 11. We're going to hear Chapters 11 and 12.
Pause, App bar button, Alt, P, Control plus P.
From the studios of the Bible Broadcasting Network, we present Christian Classics, reading from a book that has influenced the lives of many people. Our narrator is Lynn Brooks.
Today we'll be reading Chapter 11 from The Hiding Place. We had saved our radio. Every night Betsy or I would remove the stair tread and crouch over the radio, the volume barely audible, while the other one thumped the piano in Tanta Jan's room as hard as she could to hear the news from England. And at first, the news over the radio and the news in our captive press was much the same. The German offensive was everywhere victorious. Month after month, the Free Dutch broadcast could only urge us to wait, to have courage, to believe in the counteroffensive, which must surely someday be mounted. The Germans had repaired the bomb damage to the airport and were using it now as a base for air raids against England. Night after night, we lay in bed listening to the growl of engines heading west. Occasionally, English planes retaliated, and then the German fighters might intercept them right over Haarlem. One night, I tossed for an hour while dogfights raged overhead, streaking my patch of sky with fire. At last, I heard Betsy stirring in the kitchen and ran down to join her. She was making tea. She brought it into the dining room where we had covered the windows with heavy black paper and set out the best cups. Somewhere in the night there was an explosion. The dishes in the cupboard rattled. For an hour we sipped our tea and talked, until the sound of planes died away and the sky was silent. I said goodnight to Betsy at the door to Tanta Jan's rooms and groped my way up the dark stairs to my own. The fiery light was gone from the sky. I felt for my bed. There was the pillow. Then in the darkness, my hand closed over something hard, sharp, too. I felt blood trickle along a finger. It was a jagged piece of metal 10 inches long. Betsy! I raced down the stairs with a shrapnel shard in my hand. We went back to the dining room and stared at it in the light while Betsy bandaged my hand. On your pillow, she kept saying. Betsy, if I hadn't heard you in the kitchen. But Betsy put a finger on my mouth. Don't say it, Corrie. There are no ifs in God's world, and no places that are safer than other places. The center of His will is our only safety. Oh, Corrie, let us pray that we may always know it. The true horror of occupation came over us only slowly. During the first year of German rule, there were only minor attacks on Jews in Holland. A rock through the window of a Jewish-owned store, and ugly words scrawled on the wall of a synagogue. It was as though they were trying us, testing the temper of the country. How many Dutchmen would go along with them? And the answer to our shame was many. The National Socialist Bond, the Quisling organization of Holland, grew larger and bolder with each month of occupation. Some joined the NSB simply for the benefits. More food, more clothing coupons, the best jobs and housing. But others became NSBers out of conviction. Nazism was a disease to which the Dutch too were susceptible, and those with an anti-Semitic bias fell sick of it first. On our daily walk, Father and I saw the symptoms spread. A sign in a shop window, Jews will not be served. At the entrance to a public park, no Jews. On the door of the library, in front of restaurants, theaters, even the concert hall, whose alley we knew so much better than its seats. A synagogue burned down and the fire trucks came, but only to keep the flames from spreading to the buildings on either side. One noon, his father and I followed our familiar route. The sidewalks were bright with yellow stars sewn to coats and jacket fronts. Men, women, and children wore the six-pointed star with the word Jude in the center. We were surprised as we walked at how many of the people we had passed each day were Jews. The man who read the world shipping news in the Grote Markt wore a star on his neatly pressed business suit. So did the bulldog, his jowly face more deeply lined than ever, his voice, as he fussed at his dogs, sharp with strain. Worst were the disappearances. A watch, repaired and ready, hanging on its hook in the back of the shop month after month. A house in Nolly's block, mysteriously deserted, grass growing in the rose garden. One day, Mr. Kahn's shop up the street did not open. Father knocked on his door as we passed that noon to see if someone were ill, but there was no answer. The shop remained shuttered, the windows above dark and silent for several weeks. Then, although the shop stayed closed, an NSB family moved into the apartment above. We never knew whether these people had been spirited away by the Gestapo or gone into hiding before this could happen. Certainly, public arrests, with no attempt to conceal what was happening, were becoming more frequent. One day, as Father and I were returning from our walk, we found the Grote Markt cordoned off by a double ring of police and soldiers. A truck was parked in front of the fish mart. Into the back were climbing men, women, and children, all wearing the yellow star. There was no reason we could see why this particular place at this particular time had been chosen. Oh, Father, those poor people, I cried. The police line opened, the truck moved through. We watched till it turned the corner. Those poor people, Father echoed. But to my surprise, I saw that he was looking at the soldiers, now forming into ranks to march away. I pity the poor Germans, Corey. They have touched the apple of God's eye. We talked often, Father, Betsy, and I, about what we could do if a chance should come to help some of our Jewish friends. We knew that Willem had found hiding places at the beginning of the occupation for the German Jews who had been living in his house. Lately, he had also moved some of the younger Dutch Jews away from the nursing home. Not my old people, he would say. Surely they will not touch my old people. Willem had addresses. He knew of farms in rural areas where there were few occupying troops. Willem would be the one to ask. It was a drizzly November morning in 1941, a year and a half after the invasion, as I stepped outside to fold back the shutters, that I saw a group of 4 German soldiers coming down the street. They were wearing combat helmets low over their ears, rifles strapped to their shoulders. I shrank back into the doorway and watched. They were checking shop numbers as they walked. At Wheels Furrier's, directly across the street, the group stopped. One of the soldiers unstrapped his gun and with the butt banged on the door. He was drawing it back for another blow when the door opened and all 4 pushed inside. I dashed back through our shop and up to the dining room where Betsy was setting out 3 places. Betsy, hurry. Something awful is happening at Wheels. We reached the front door again in time to see Mr. Wheel backing out of his shop, the muzzle of a gun pressed against his stomach. When he had prodded Mr. Wheel a short way down the sidewalk, the soldier went back into the store and slammed the door. Not an arrest, then. Inside, we could hear glass breaking. Soldiers began carrying out armloads of furs. A crowd was gathering in spite of the early morning hour. Mr. Wheel had not moved from the spot on the sidewalk where the soldier had left him. A window over his head opened, and a small shower of clothes rained down on him, pajamas, shirts, underwear. Slowly, mechanically, the old furrier stooped and began to gather up his clothing. Betsy and I ran across the street to help him. "Your wife," Betsy whispered urgently. "Where is Mrs. Wheel?" The man only blinked at her. "You must come inside," I said, snatching socks and handkerchiefs from the sidewalk. "Quick, come with us." And we propelled the bewildered old man across to the Baye. Father was in the dining room when we reached it and greeted Mr. Wheel without the slightest sign of surprise. His natural manners seemed to relax the furrier a bit. His wife, he said, was visiting a sister in Amsterdam. "We must find a telephone and warn her not to come home," Betsy said. Like most private telephones, ours had been disconnected early in the occupation. There were public phones at several places in the city, but of course, messages went to a public reception center at the other end. Was it right to connect a family in Amsterdam with the trouble here? And if Mrs. Wheel could not come home, where was she to go? Where were the Wheels to live? Certainly not with a sister where they could so easily be traced. Father and Betsy and I exchanged glances. Almost with a single breath, we said, "Willem." Again, it was not the kind of matter that could be relayed through the public phone system. Someone had to go, and I was the obvious choice. Dutch trains were dirty and overcrowded under the occupation. The trip that should have taken under an hour took nearly 3. Willem was not there when I finally reached the big nursing home just after noon, but Tyne and their 22-year-old son Kik were. I told them what had happened and gave them the Amsterdam address. "Tell Mr. Wheel to be ready as soon as it's dark," Kik said. But it was nearly 9 p.m., the new curfew hour, before Kik rapped at the alley door. Tucking Mr. Wheel's clothing bundle beneath his arm, he led the man away into the night. It was more than 2 weeks before I saw Kik again to ask him what had happened. He smiled at me, the broad, slow smile I had loved since he was a child. "If you're going to work with the underground, Tante Cora, you must learn not to ask questions." That was all we ever learned at the Wheels. But Kik's words went round and round in my head. The underground. If you're going to work with the underground. Was Kik working with this secret and illegal group? Was Willem? We knew, of course, that there was an underground in Holland, or suspected it. Most cases of sabotage were not reported in our controlled press, but rumors abounded. A factory had been blown up. A train carrying political prisoners had been stopped, and 7 or 17 or 70 had made it away. The rumors tended to get more spectacular with each repetition. But always they featured things we believed were wrong in the sight of God. Stealing, lying, murder. Was this what God wanted in times like these? How should a Christian act when evil was in power? It was about a month after the raid on the fur shop that Father and I, on our usual walk, saw something so very unusual that we both stopped in mid-stride. Walking toward us along the sidewalk, as so many hundreds of times before, came the bulldog with his rolling, short-legged gait. The bright yellow star had by now ceased to look extraordinary. So what? And then I knew what was wrong. The dogs. The dogs were not with him. He passed without seeming to see us. With one accord, Father and I turned around and walked after him. He turned a number of corners while we grew more and more embarrassed at following him without any real excuse. Although Father and he had tipped their hats to each other for years, we had never spoken and did not even know his name. At last, the man stopped in front of a small second-hand shop, took out a ring of keys, and let himself in. We looked through the window at the cluttered interior. Only a glance showed us that this was more than the usual hodgepodge of bric-a-brac and hollow-seated chairs. Someone who loved beautiful things had chosen everything here. "We must bring Betsy," I said. A little bell over the door jingled as we stepped in. Astonishing to see the bulldog hatless and indoors, unlocking a cash drawer at the rear of the store. "Permit an introduction, sir. I am Casper ten Boom, and this is my daughter, Cornelia." The bulldog shook hands, and again I noticed the deep creases in the sagging cheeks. "Harry de Vries. Mr. de Vries, we've so often admired your affection for your bulldogs. We hope they are well." The squat little man stared from one of us to the other. Slowly, the heavy, rimmed eyes filled with tears. "Are they well? I believe they are well. I hope that they are well. They are dead." Today on Christian Classics, we have been reading from The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom with John and Elizabeth Sherrill, published by the Fleming H. Revell Company.
You've been listening to Christian Classics, narrated by Lynn Brooks. This has been a production of the Bible Broadcasting Network.
Now, The Hiding Place from Friday, January 10th. No, let's see here. Friday, January 9th, I should say, 2026. Let's begin.
From the studios of the Bible Broadcasting Network, we present Christian Classics, reading from a book that has influenced the lives of many people. Our narrator is Lynn Brooks.
Today we'll be reading chapter 12 from The Hiding Place. With a gesture of his hands, Mr. DeVries invited us into a small room in back of the shop and gave us chairs.
Miss ten Boom, I am a Jew. Who knows when they will come to take me away? My wife, too, although she is a Gentile, is in danger because of her marriage.
The bulldog raised his chin so high his jowls stretched taut.
It is not for ourselves we mind. We are Christians, Cato and I. When we die, we will see Jesus. This is all that matters. But I said to Cato, what about the dogs? If we are taken away, who will feed them? Who will remember their water and their walk? They will wait, and we will not come, and they will not understand. No, this way my mind is at ease. My dear friend,
Father grasped the bulldog's hand in both of his.
now that these dear companions may no longer walk with you, will you not do my daughter and me the great honor of accompanying us?
But this the bulldog would not do.
It would put you in danger.
He did, however, accept an invitation to come to visit us.
After dark,
he said. And so one evening the following week, Mr. DeVries came to the alley door of the Bayet, bringing his sweet, shy wife, Cato. And soon, she and Harry were almost nightly visitors in Tante Jean's front room. The bulldog's chief delight at the Bayet, after talking with Father, were the tomes of Jewish theology now housed in Tante Jean's big mahogany case. For he had become a Christian some 40 years earlier, without ceasing in the least to be a loyal Jew.
A completed Jew, a follower of the one perfect Jew,
he would tell us smilingly. The books belonged to the rabbi of Harlem. He had brought them to Father more than a year before.
Just in case I shall not be able to care for them, indefinitely.
He had waved a bit apologetically at the procession of small boys behind him, each staggering under the weight of several huge volumes.
My little hobby, book collecting.
And yet, old friend, books do not age as you and I do. They will speak still, and we are gone, to generations we will never see. Yes, the books must survive. The rabbi had been one of the first to vanish from Harlem. How often it is a small, almost unconscious event that marks the turning point. As arrests of Jews in the street became more frequent, I had begun picking up and delivering work for our Jewish customers myself, so that they would not have to venture into the center of town. And so one evening in the early spring of 1942, I was in the home of a doctor and his wife. They were a very old Dutch family. The portraits on the walls could have been a textbook of Holland's history. The Heemsters and I were talking about the things that were discussed whenever a group of people got together in those days. Rationing and the news from England. When down the stairs piped a childish voice. "Daddy, you didn't tuck us in." Dr. Heemster was on his feet in an instant. With an apology to his wife and me, he hurried upstairs, and in a minute We heard a game of hide and seek going, and the shrill laughter of 2 children. That was all. Nothing had changed. Mrs. Heemstra continued with her recipe for stretching the tea ration with rose leaves, and yet everything was changed. For in that instant, reality broke through the numbness that had grown in me since the invasion. At any minute, there might be a rap on this door. These children, this mother and father, might be ordered to the back of a truck. Dr. Heemstra came back to the living room, and the conversation rambled on, but under the words, a prayer was forming in my heart. Lord Jesus, I offer myself for your people in any way, any place, any time. And then an extraordinary thing happened. Even as I prayed, that waking dream passed again before my eyes. I saw again those 4 black horses in the Grotemarkt. As I had on the night of the invasion, I scanned the passengers drawn so unwillingly behind them. Father, Betsy, Willem, myself, leaving Haarlem, leaving all that was sure and safe. Going where? It was Sunday, May 10th, 1942, exactly 2 years after the fall of Holland. The sunny spring skies, the flowers and the lamppost boxes did not at all reflect the city's mood. German soldiers wandered aimlessly through the streets, some looking as if they had not yet recovered from a hard Saturday night, some already on the lookout for girls, a few hunting for a place to worship. Each month, the occupation seemed to grow harsher, restrictions more numerous. The latest heartache for Dutchmen was an edict making it a crime to sing our national anthem. Father, Betsy, and I were on our way to the Dutch Reformed Church in Velsen, a small town not far from Haarlem, where Peter had won the post of organist in competition against 40 older and more experienced musicians. The organ at Velsen was one of the finest in the country. Though the train seemed slower each time, we went frequently. Peter was already playing, invisible in the tall organ loft when we squeezed into the crowded pew. That was one thing the occupation had done for Holland. Churches were packed. After hymns and prayers came the sermon. A good one today, I thought. I wished Peter would pay closer attention. He regarded sermons as interesting only to venerable relics like his mother and me. I had reached 50 that spring. To Peter, the age at which life had definitely passed by. I would beg him to remember that death and ultimate issues could come for any of us at any age, especially these days. But he would reply charmingly that he was too fine a musician to die young. The closing prayers was said, and then, electrically, the whole church sat at attention. Without preamble, every stop pulled out to full volume, Peter was playing the national anthem. Father, at 82, was the first one on his feet. Now everyone was standing. From somewhere in back of us, a voice sang out the words. Another joined in, and another. Then we were all singing together, the full voice of Holland singing her forbidden anthem. We sang at the top of our lungs, sang our oneness, our hope, our love for Queen and country. On this anniversary of defeat, it seemed almost a moment that we were victors. Afterward, we waited for Peter at the small side door of the church. It was a long time before he was free to come away with us. So many people wanted to embrace him, to shake his hand and thump his back. Clearly, he was enormously pleased with himself. But now that the moment had passed, I was, as usual, angry with him. The Gestapo was certain to hear about it, perhaps already had. Their eyes and ears were everywhere. I thought of Nolly, home fixing Sunday dinner for us all. I thought of Peter's brothers and sisters. And Flip, what if he lost the principalship of the school for this? And for what had Peter risked so much? Not for people's lives, but for a gesture, for a moment's meaningless defiance. At Bossenhovenstraat, however, Peter was a hero as one by one his family made us describe again what had happened. The only members of the household who felt as I did were the 2 Jewish women staying at Nolly's. One of these was an elderly Austrian lady whom Willem had sent into... Katrien, as the family had rechristened her, was posing as the Van Woerden's housemaid, although Nolly confided to me that she had yet so much as to make her own bed. Probably she did not know how, as she came from a wealthy and aristocratic family. The other woman was a young, blonde, blue-eyed Dutch Jew with flawless false identity papers supplied by the Dutch National Underground itself. The papers were so good, and Anneliese looked so unlike the Nazi stereotype of a Jew, that she went freely in and out of the house, shopping and helping out at the school, giving herself out to be a friend of the family whose husband had died in the bombing of Rotterdam. Katrien and Anneliese could not understand any more than I could Peter's deliberately doing something which would attract the attention of the authorities. I spent an anxious afternoon, tensing at the sound of every motor, for only the police, Germans, and NSBers had automobiles nowadays. But the time came to go home to the Bayeux, and still nothing had happened. I worried 2 more days, then decided either Peter had not been reported or that the Gestapo had more important things to occupy them. It was Wednesday morning, just as Father and I were unlocking our workbenches, that Peter's little sister, Cocky, burst into the shop. "Opa, Tante Corey, they came for Peter. They took him away." Who? Where? But she didn't know, and it was 3 days before the family learned that he had been taken to the federal prison in Amsterdam. It was 7:55 in the evening, just a few minutes before the new curfew hour of 8 o'clock. Peter had been in prison for 2 weeks. Father and Betsy and I were seated around the dining room table, Father replacing watches in their pockets, and Betsy doing needlework. Our big, black, slightly Persian cat curled contentedly in her lap. A knock on the alley door made me glance in the window mirror. There, in the bright spring twilight, stood a woman. She carried a small suitcase and, odd for the time of year, wore a fur coat, gloves, and a heavy veil. I ran down and opened the door. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was high-pitched in fear. "Well, of course." I stepped back. The woman looked over her shoulder before moving into the little hallway. "My name is Kleermaker. I'm a Jew." "How do you do?" I reached out to take her bag, but she held on to it. "Won't you come upstairs?" Father and Betsy stood up as we entered the dining room. "Mrs. Kleermaker, my father, and my sister." "I was about to make some tea," cried Betsy. "You're just in time to join us." Father drew out a chair from the table, and Mrs. Kleermaker sat down, still gripping the suitcase. The tea consisted of old leaves which had been crushed and reused so often they did little more than color the water. But Mrs. Kleermaker accepted it gratefully, plunging into the story of how her husband had been arrested some months before, her son gone into hiding. Yesterday, the SD, the political police who worked under the Gestapo, had ordered her to close the family clothing store. She was afraid now to go back to the apartment above it. She had heard that we had befriended a man on this street. "In this household, God's people are always welcome." "We have 4 empty beds upstairs," said Betsy. "Your problem will be choosing which one to sleep in." Then, to my astonishment, she added, "First, though, give me a hand with the tea things." I could hardly believe my ears. Betsy never let anyone help in her kitchen. "I'm just a fussy old maid," she'd say. But Mrs. Kleermaker had jumped to her feet with pathetic eagerness and was already stacking plates and cups. Today on Christian Classics, we have been reading from The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom with John and Elizabeth Sherrill, published by the Fleming H. Revell Company.
You've been listening to Christian Classics, narrated by Lynn Brooks. This has been a production of the Bible Broadcasting Network.
Play app bar button Alt P Control plus P.
And so we conclude the chapters, let's see, I believe that was chapters 11 and 12 of The Hiding Place. I'll post more as time permits and as I can. Until next time, may the Lord richly bless you. You have a great day, my friend. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.